Hello and thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Speak up, speak up. Hello, hello. Feel free to introduce yourselves into chat in terms of, why you're here, what you're hoping to get from the Huawei developer talks, so that, we can essentially take your feedback and take it on board and try to develop programs that are helpful for you, as well as, projects that we can work together. So do speak up. We're very sort of, we're very open-minded, essentially at Huawei developer groups. And we're encouraging multidisciplinary and cross-cultural collaborations. So please feel free to, comment and chat if you don't want to, put your video or microphone on. But, let's try to build this community of amazing innovators and thinkers and doers together. Okay. And so with that, let me introduce Eva. Eva is fantastic, clearly. She's absolutely hugely intelligent, very thoughtful. We had met at Drinking Dialogues, which is a community group of, diverse-minded people. And, we cover different topics, whether it is, management theories or sustainable technologies, or, even obscure things such as, theater and how can we role play within management, so that we can actually interact with our colleagues and team members better, as well as sometimes having debates about how numbers don't tell us everything. And the most important, quality of technology is always the people and the relationships that we have with people and the relationships we have with nature. Now, Eva's specialism is actually in looking at, the sustainability goals that, have been shared from the UN. And so I'm absolutely delighted that she's agreed to give us her wonderful talk. Now, just before we do that, can the Huawei team share in chat the 3 links to the Huawei content? Because we have, for a very long time, Huawei has been committed to sustainable technologies and trying to build, much better communities around how can we take care of each other and how can we take care of the planet, and develop these new, economics and technology systems for the benefit of everybody. Okay. And with that, Eva, I give the floor to you, and really looking forward to your brilliant talk.
Thank you so much, Tran. It's really a pleasure to be here. I told you many times before, you are a role model to me with the thoughts that you have developed in your life, and with how you approach the history of technology and science. And it is just amazing, and it's very inspiring, and I'm very grateful to be here today to share some thoughts, and especially to keep developing them with the community together, because I'm sure there are lots of amazing people in this group that I haven't had the chance to meet yet, and I really look forward to that. So thank you. Today's talk is about humane technology and sustainable engineering in the 21st century. We will look at exactly these topics. So first we'll take a dive into what humane technology is and how to build it. Then we'll let actually other people talk about what sustainable engineering is and how to apply it in society and in our lives. And finally, something that I care about very much is the discussion, questions, and experience section, where we can share what we've experienced in this talk together. So again, hi, my name is Eva. Thank you for having me. I'm here today to support our collective cause of building our future together. Originally, I'm from Berlin, Germany, and have been living in the canton of Zurich in Switzerland for the past 8 years. I'm trained as a cultural scientist, and in my bachelor and master degree programs, I chose to discover the human condition from the perspectives of linguistics, psychology, cultural studies, philosophy, media studies, and art history. And at the same time, I'm fascinated by technological products in our society, by the engineering profession and the technology industry, and also by continual improvement, change, processes, systems, and human collaboration. And that is why I chose to transition to the technology industry, specifically the medical device industry, where I currently work as a quality systems manager. In my spare time, I support the Zurich-based nonprofit organization called Women++ as an executive board member. And our mission is to increase diversity in the Swiss tech industry and to support women in building and leading their careers in the tech sector. So back to the medtech industry. What I find interesting here is the challenge of the conditions and practice within it, which we will see overall more of in the future of tech products. First, there is a very high degree of regulation, which is comparable to aerospace, automobile, or pharmaceutical industries. Second, product development or R&D in this context has become very capital intense, both economically and with regard to skilled labor. Third, the design, application, and monitoring of these products once they're on the market is becoming increasingly complex. And fourth, in medtech, it is all about the human-machine interface, which is also increasingly becoming relevant in the 21st century. So, having been socialized in an academic context in the humanities, I still often feel like an anthropologist in the tech industry, which gives me a unique perspective. And I think that it is safe to say that technological products are being developed in a fierce environment. And the question for a tech company today typically is how to stay competitive and innovative. So it is exactly this dynamic that historically drove the emergence in the 20th century of what Jacques Ellul called technique. What does Jacques Ellul mean by technique? The term technique does not mean machines, technology, or this or that procedure for attaining an end. In our technological society, technique is the totality of methods rationally arrived at and having absolute efficiency for a given stage of development in every field of human activity. Its characteristics are new. The technique of the present has no common measure with that of the past. So my personal journey in the technology industry so far has not just been about the profession as in becoming an expert in quality systems management. It has been and is about experiencing what it means to go through such an industrial machine, what it feels like to me as a worker, what all involved stakeholders imagine that they can and cannot do, and of course, how technological products are being developed procedurally, as there are numerous methods being applied such as agile methodology, systems engineering, rapid prototyping, to name just a few. And why am I doing this? Because this helps me in building an understanding of the conditions, the constraints, and most importantly, the potential for how designing a context and selecting tools, methods, and instruments, as well as personnel, through which humane technology can become a possibility in the industry. But before we begin, let us connect for a moment. And I mean here connecting across the digital space, across geographical regions, across cultures, across gender, and across the professions, just to name a few variations. Most importantly, we will now do an exercise together for connecting with yourself as a human being. This exercise will take about 15 to 20 minutes. And for some, it might feel easy and relaxing, especially after a business day. For some, it might feel strange or even stressful. Our intent here is to become present and aware of us in our state as human beings, which includes your body, your mind, really any sensations from the perceptual or other systems of your body. So let's begin. I would like to ask each one of you to locate an object nearby that means something to you. If you feel maybe you cannot find such an object right now, maybe there's clean desk policy or something like that happens, don't worry. Just pick something. Ideally, it would be something that means something to you. However, any object will work. For example, I took this stone. I found a stone on a mountaintop in Switzerland. In Switzerland, people really like to hike, so you just pick it up when you're here. And it was like 2,000 meters high in the canton of Grisons, which is beautiful. It's in the south. And as I was coming down a hill, I noticed this stone. And it's just a regular stone, right? Compressed. But I noticed these two very distinct, super precise marks. I was like, what? How did that get there? And my sci-fi imagination popped up immediately, coming up with all sorts of ideas and associations. So I give you maybe a couple more seconds. Have you all located an object? Okay. Now take the object and just hold it in your hands. Start by just looking at it. Now turn the object around in your hands a little bit, move it, feel how it feels in your fingers. Take in the angles, the colors, the shapes, the textures, even the smell. Oh, this smells like stone. Really cold. And run your fingers along the pattern, the edges, the surface. Go explore the object in your hand and allow yourself the opportunity to feel what that's like. By now, some of you might feel strange when doing this, like, this is weird, why are we doing this? And some might find it exciting, like we're playing together, exploring our realities. It's all okay. It really is about you becoming aware in the moment and connecting with what is in front of you. And now ask yourself, what are you becoming aware of? Maybe you realize something that you've never seen before. What are you noticing? Just take a mental note or even write it down. And explore the feelings or emotions that come up in you. And when you do that, try not to judge. For example, the fact that you're lacking something. Just let it get into you, take it in, and enjoy it. Allow yourself to be present with the feelings that the object generates in you, and the memories, associations, stories that come up with that. For example, about where it came from, how it came into your life, or the person or persons that are associated with that particular object. Just observe the thoughts that are going through your head. Thank you for entertaining that. Now, I'm curious about the experiences that you've just had. Put the object aside and take a minute to write down a few things that you would like to share within this group. There won't be time for everyone to share their experience. I'm looking for 2 to 3 people who choose to share what they have observed. So please take a moment and write down what came up for you, what was alive for you, and what did you become aware of? Okay, thank you. Now, who would like to share their experience with the group? You can put it in the chat. You can say verbally, however you prefer.
I
Don't
can
be
share
shy.
something.
Yay! Go for it, Emilia.
Let me put on my video as well. Hello, everyone. Hi,
Hello,
Eva.
hello.
Hi, Emilia.
I'm sitting here on my balcony, and this was the object I picked. And well, it has a longer history than I can reasonably explain even in this video. It's a plant that I have propagated from another plant. This is the mother plant.
Nice.
And the mother of this plant is actually a plant of a friend of mine, who I'm unfortunately fallen out with. So there was a lot of kind of thoughts about that, about friendship. But the other exciting thing that came up when you asked to touch it, and I realized I've never really felt it, and I started to think about like, what kind of other materials feel like this? I don't think any. It's kind of like smooth and sticky at the same time, and I tried to figure out like synthetic materials that would feel like that. I went into like leather, and I was like, nah, it's not quite the same. Plastic also not. So yeah, it took me to very many places, this exercise. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Emilia, and for participating.
Happy to be here.
Thanks. Who would like to share next?
I feel like the guys, the male participants, need to step up and and tell us what their object is. Come on, guys. Any brave people? Such as Nareg or Ahmed or Anwar. The floor is yours. Okay, somebody.
It is okay. It is okay.
I've seen somebody
Yay!
put put something in the chat box. I think it's from Mikaranko. Yes, it's my friend. He said he just touched his friend's cat. That thing. It looks like it's for food. Yeah, I think that cat is mine. It's made of stone. Yeah, I know it. It's made of stone. Yeah, and it feels kind of from marble, but actually the material is very raw. Yeah, actually this kind of buzzing is from my friend who took it from Lapland. It's in the lost part of the Finland. It's a really interesting material, and because it's always in that kind of low temperature and really cold temperatures, that kind of information, that kind of situation, and then make that kind of stone always can keep a little bit cold, and the color is very shining, so it's very interesting one. But I'm sorry, my cat will maybe don't let me share it over here. Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting activity.
Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. I think, is there anybody else who would like to share? Then I can maybe share mine. So really the association that I have with that is that when I was walking down the hill and I saw this object, just this contrast of the natural and the somehow artificial excited me. And I thought, oh my God, some alien must have come down and lasered that in there. because I really like sci-fi, right? And there's this movie called Predator. And I was like, yeah, he totally lasered that in there. And I was just like, what? And every time I touch it, I'm careful because it starts to crumble a little bit, the piece of stone, right? And if I would do it long enough, probably the stone would be much smaller at some point. And I'm just happy to have this object. It's really nice, and it makes my mind blow up with ideas. And it's nice that such a thing can do that for you, right? Oh, Twain, you have something.
Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
So I've got a yellow plant pot. We didn't color coordinate this, Eva, but but this is my little plant pot with my little plant in it. It's a little it's a hairy cactus, right?
I would really like to touch it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it feels like a combination of wool and felt. And so sometimes I've been tempted to try to plait the the little plant's hair. So, but I loved Amelia's story about how nature propagates and how the things that we share with our friends, they are living. And so, in so many ways, when we think about anthropology, how we are, chains, we are the intelligent chains, in a long history of sharing intelligences with each other. So I love that story.
Thank you very much, Twain. Maybe just a quick summary. So what happened with us, with you while you were doing the exercise? By virtue of the fact that you are allowing your senses to explore an object in front of you, you are pausing. And you're using a faculty that you have already been cultivating your whole life, but that in our busy lives gets to sit on the back seat of our journey often, which is to give attention. In today's fast-track lives, we typically pay attention, which is a passive reaction within the mechanistic principle of what Jacques Ellul called the technique. We sort of have lost sight of what it means to be present. And if we don't start getting back to that, we're not going to be teaching technology to be present, right? And that is an issue. So instead, we have the opportunity every day to give attention as a response to the possibility of another future. And this is what we just experienced together. And you can practice that every day on your own with your colleagues or friends or anybody else that you wish to share this experience with. And as you'll hear later, it is also a core competency of the global citizen in the 21st century. This future state that we need to be in, this humane condition, which by the way goes for both humans and technology, is very important. And being in appreciation in and of itself is part of, and is not a means to an end, but an end in itself. If we cannot be in appreciation with the things in front of us, how do we want to do that with people? And for that, we need to be able to perceive things and people from moment to moment without judging them, but by perceiving them in their current state. And that is kind of the next frontier, because people change. So why should our idea of them stay the same? If you want to address people as human beings, you need to bring them back to the realization and memory that they are human, and that we share the capacity for the human state. We need to remind ourselves that the people on the other screen have life, have energy, have connection. And we need to exchange the mechanistic principle of the technique with a relational or correlative principle of the future human state. Which brings us to the first section of humane technology. Now, what can we understand by humane technology? What is it, and how can it be built? First, let me start by saying that there is a wealth of literature and theory out there about the history and philosophy of technology and about the history and philosophy of engineering. And I really recommend to you to read some of it because it will give you a sense of relativity of our profession and of your profession and of the technological artifacts and systems that engineers and developers have built in the past. This insight will teach you under which circumstances and constraints that happened. And important concepts from within this field of studies are, for example, technology, technique, machine, instrument, tool, method, process, and system, to name just a few. It will also allow you, it will show you the huge impact engineers and developers actually have on our society, because everything around us is human-made, has been researched, theorized, experimented with, and been built by people. I don't think that engineers and developers are always aware of the impact that their work has on all of our lives. And with that comes some degree of responsibility, I think. Not in a moral sense, in my opinion, but in an obligation to create the best possible mode of action in the form of technological products or artifacts. So in this section, we will look at some basic concepts of technology, engineering, systems engineering, and of course, humaneness. Mario Bunge, an Argentine-Canadian theoretical physicist and philosopher of science, describes technology as follows. The goal of technology is successful action rather than pure knowledge, and accordingly, the whole attitude of the technologist while applying his or her or their technological knowledge is active in the sense that far from being an inquisitive onlooker or a diligent borrower, he or she or they are an active participant in events. Now let that sink in for a moment. You as developers and engineers literally have the key on your hands for action that will be embedded in the technological artifacts that you are building or co-building. And of course, your action also happens within a certain framework and thus constraints. For example, employed work. How free are you or we in the framework of an environment where you work for someone else who practically defines the conditions under which you work? So I would like you to think about the degree of freedom that you have. You just need to define it and claim it. A freedom of action that you see for yourself in your work, where there is an opportunity legally to implement action that nurtures humaneness and technology. Take a note of your thought, if you wish, that you are having now, because I'd be curious to hear about that from you at the end of the talk, if you are willing to share that with us. Now let's move to the concept of engineering. Archie Harms, Brian Bates, and Rudy Feuti frame engineering in their book, Engineering in Time, The Systematics of Engineering History and Its Contemporary Context, as follows. In its earliest form, engineering involved the making of stone tools and other artifacts to aid in human survival. During the ensuing millennia, the manufacture of ingenious devices expanded and contributed to the shaping of civilizations, to the establishment of human institutions, and to the enhancement of standards of living. Now, in the 21st century, engineering may be viewed as a profession which involves creative thought and skilled actions related to conceptualizing, planning, designing, developing, making, testing, implementing, using, improving, and disposing of a variety of devices, invariably seeking to meet a perceived societal interest. In these various functions, engineers connect the natural world of materials and phenomena with the societal world of needs and aspirations. And this conceptualization is framed in such a way that it addresses particularly the opportunity that lies ahead in this 21st century, which is characterized by the possibility to become aware of our humane condition and continuously reactivating it by means of technology. Maybe you remember Jacques Ellul's definition of technique that I shared in the beginning. Let me just repeat it here. For Ellul, technique is the totality of methods rationally arrived at and having absolute efficiency for a given stage of development in every field of human activity. It is literally the imperative of a performance and output-oriented culture. Now, how is that relevant to our discussion today? There is a very interesting international organization called INCOSI, which is the International Council of Systems Engineering, which was founded in 1919. They are a great community, open-minded, collaborative, supportive, and educational. And I'm a member of it. There are typically local chapters, and there's also one in Switzerland, which is called SSSE. The core publication of INCOSE is called the Systems Engineering Handbook. Additionally, the community is continuously building a collection of practical advice in the form of an online Wikipedia called HDG, which is the guide to the systems engineering body of knowledge. Now, how does INCOSE define engineering? In general, engineering can be regarded as the practice of creating and sustaining services, systems, devices, machines, structures. Oh, we already had that. Sorry. Right. It's not INCOSE who defines engineering, but let's say it like that. So we're moving to INCOSE's definition of engineering, but first we'll look at Mario Bunge. So in general, engineering can be regarded as the practice of creating and sustaining services, systems, devices, machines, structures, processes, and products to improve the quality of life. Getting things done effectively and efficiently. The repeatability of experiments demanded by science is critical for delivering practical engineering solutions that have commercial value. Engineering in general and systems engineering in particular draw heavily from the terminology and concepts of science. Just to clarify, this is the definition from INCOSE. I just forgot to update the reference. So what I wanted to highlight here is that you can see from this definition, a loose conception of the technique is pervading foundational ideas of engineering in the business space. They're talking about getting things done effectively and efficiently. And this is, in a sense, good news, because we're able to realize that this is so, that this is something, this is the constraints under which we operate currently. And we can choose to become aware of it, and within that, develop proposals for improving current practice in real life, which means to take society and the impact of technology on society into scope when developing technological products. And you know, I'm really driven by pragmatic questions here, such as, what are current models of tech product development and what do they contain? Is society even reflected as a proper stakeholder in current tech product development models? That's a relevant question because only defined stakeholders are seen as user needs representatives that ultimately get translated into technological requirements that are then built into technology. And once verified and validated, will be shipped out in the form of a product into the real world. Another question is the potential impact of technology on society part of any ethical or risk assessment in current tech product development models and practice? From my own practice in the industry and from the models that I've seen so far, such as lifecycle development or design control processes, the answer is rather no, it is not. And again, that is good news in a sense, because it gives us a place to start from. For example, it enables us to identify where exactly in the organization, with which tools and methods, and most importantly, with which people and their skills and competencies, we can start building the humane condition into technology, thereby making it a reality in our lives. And in the next couple of slides, I will share some definitions and models from the Systems Engineering Handbook of INCOSE and the HDG. This is meant to look at current engineering and tech product development practice. So what is a system? The systems considered in the International Standard for Systems and Software Engineering and in the Systems Engineering Handbook of INCOSE are man-made, created and utilized to provide products or services in defined environments for the benefit of users and other stakeholders. The definitions cited here refer to systems in the real world. A system concept should be regarded as a shared mental representation of the actual system. The systems engineer must continually distinguish between systems in the real world and system representations. And the INCOSE definitions draw from the following view of a system. It is an integrated set of elements, subsystems, or assemblies that accomplish a defined objective. These elements include products, such as hardware, software, firmware, processes, people, information, techniques, facilities, services, and other support elements. And it is a combination of interacting elements organized to achieve one or more stated purposes. And what you see on the slide here is just one figure from the INCOSY handbook, which shows here a hierarchical view of the system or a system of interest, which can contain different systems and system elements. There are two fundamental types of systems. Well, there could be a third, but we'll focus on two: closed systems and open systems. And according to a very basic definition of the C-book, a closed system is a system which has no interactions with its environment. You can see that on the left. An open system is a system which exchanges inputs and outputs with its environment. You can see that on the right. A more broader definition would be a closed system is a system which can exchange only energy with surroundings. Matter cannot be exchanged in a closed system. Closed systems are not usually portions of larger systems and are not even in complete contact with them. Closed systems are sometimes also called non-flow processes because of the inability to exchange mass of a substance over a procedure. And examples of a closed system would be the Earth. It receives lots of energy from the sun, but the exchange of matter with the outside is not possible. A covered beaker of water. It is a closed system because only heat energy can leave or enter. The amount of water will always remain the same unless disturbed. Or putting an ice pack on an injury with some bag or plastic to contain water from entering if there is a wound. An open system, on the other hand, is a system which can exchange both matter and energy with surroundings. They are a portion and an intimate contact with a larger system, so there is an underlying part-whole structure logic to it. Open systems are sometimes termed flow systems because of the ability to exchange mass of a substance. And examples of an open system are the human body, an automobile engine, a beaker of water where water can evaporate and the beaker does not insulate inside at all. And another very useful concept in a systems engineering handbook is that a particular system or a system of interest is enabled by other systems, so-called enabling systems. Let's take the bus as a public transportation as our system of interest in an example. The bus requires the following enabling systems to function according to its purpose. It needs customers or passengers. It needs roads. It needs fuel or electricity, depending on the technology of the vehicle. It needs to be cleaned every once in a while, and so on. But so much on systems engineering. I know this was a very short overview. I can only recommend to you to look into this further if you're not familiar with it yet, which I'm sure you are, because it's a very exciting methodology within tech development, and it will help us to think about humane technology, which we'll come to in a second. But finally, let's look at some tech product development models, one in particular, which is a generic one. Here is an example of a generic business lifecycle model that is currently applied in the industry. At the top, you can see the very basic development cycle phases, such as concept, development, production, and utilization. In the middle, you can see the break-even point at which the company starts making money with their product. And at the top right corner, you see the direction of the curve on the return on investment. The company wants that to be as high as possible for as long as possible. Why am I showing you this? When preparing for our call, I realized that this model completely follows what Elul called the technique. We see here reflected only the economic reality constructed by industry and business to capitalize on material and intellectual investments. There is no revenue on whether the product made anybody happy, for example. The impact that the tech product potentially has on the human user or society is simply not existent. And the reason for that, on the one hand, is that the orthodoxy of efficiency is defining the model's form and thus its outcome. On the other hand, society and the human condition are just not part of the process yet. And this needs, I think, to change, and it is changing right now. And I really wish I had the time to really dive into this further today, to think about where and exactly how we can bring a change or simply improvement to the overall architecture of building technological products in the industry in the future. But instead, today, we simply look at the big picture. And to visualize what I understand by humane technology, I will now share with you a case study about the nicest bus driver in Bonn, which is a large city in Germany. His name is Dawood Mubasher Shatta, and he enacts in his job every day the principle of humane technology. So this video is in German, but I added some subtitles.
Hatte Dawood Shatta sich beworben und plötzlich ging alles schnell. Von jungen bis zu alten Gästen, die mit dem Busfahrer Dawood Shatta fahren, sind überrascht, dass auch ein Busfahrer bei Ein- und Aussteigen die Fahrgäste begrüßt bzw. verabschiedet.
Now notice how he observes if people are sitting down and only then puts the system into motion.
Besondere Rücksicht hat der netteste Busfahrer Bonds für Mütter, ältere Menschen, Menschen mit Behinderung.
Die Leute mit Kinderwagen, Gehhilfe oder Rollstuhl, für denen habe ich immer besonders Rücksicht und habe ich auch sehr oft geholfen, weil die alten Leute können auch nicht so schnell einsteigen und aussteigen. Die Sachen, ich finde, das ist auch eine Arbeit und meine Aufgabe ist eine Verantwortung und vor allem nicht nur Busfahren und Tür zumachen, aufmachen, losfahren, sondern die Fahrgäste, wie die drinnen sind oder wer wo sitzt oder wer überhaupt Hilfe braucht. Deswegen die Leute denken, das ist ganz besonders und finden auch ganz anders die andere Busfahrer.
Hatte Dawood Shatta
So what makes up a responsive system like the one that we have just seen? Responsive system is an open system. It gives attention. It responds. It means it operates in a humanistic principle instead of reacts, which would follow a mechanistic principle. It generates positive feelings in the human who engages with it. And that ultimately means that it integrates human experiences and generates new ones. To summarize, a responsive system is alive. And that's what we got to build into our systems to create humane technology. In the following section, or in this section, I will not speak really anymore. I will instead let a group of pioneers share their vision of sustainable engineering. Particularly, I wanted to share with you some clips from an event called Towards a Global Body of Knowledge for Teaching Sustainable Engineering, which was held virtually by the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies on the 27th of October last year. And in the next 22 minutes, you will hear from three amazing people from the field of sustainable engineering. First, Dr. Claire A. Nelson, who is, among other things, Chief Ideation Leader at the Futures Forum, as well as Lead Futurist at the Center for Sustainable Futures of the School of Engineering at Morgan State University. Second, Dr. John Atkinson, who holds the Scott and Colleen Stevens Chair in Engineering Sustainability and is an Associate Professor in Environmental Engineering at the University of Buffalo. Third, Dr. Niebert Blair, who is the Capacity Building Advisor for the 11th European Development Fund Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Engineering in the Caribbean. So let's begin with Dr. Claire A. Nelson.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our global audience. I'm Shirin Tekinay, Chair of the Global Engineering Deans Council, and it is my pleasure and honor today to introduce to you a panel that comprises the working group established under the auspices of the Sustainable Futures Lab at the School of Engineering at Morgan State University, to begin our conversation on how to teach sustainability to all engineering professionals. Where is that curriculum? Who makes that up? And how do we implement it? As we near the 2030 deadline on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, one thing we can all agree on is that we want our planet to be sustainable, healthy, safe, and joyous. But how do we do that as engineers? So today it is my honor to introduce to you again a dear colleague, Dr. Claire Nelson, whose latest book, Smart Futures, I just had the pleasure of finishing, is going to lead this panel of experts to start the discussion, the global discussion on how we implement sustainability on our planet. She is joined by 5 experts from the working group from all around the world this morning, this afternoon, this evening. We do span the world. And without further ado, Dr. Nelson, the floor is yours.
Greetings and salutation. As in Jamaica we always say, and friends all. I feel as if I'm among friends because I'm certainly in the arms of my loving engineering community, a community I long to join since I was 13 years old, going to all girls high school in Kingston, Jamaica. I am the co-founder and director of the Sustainable Futures Lab at Morgan State. Thank you so much, Morgan State, for being one of the first believers in the gospel of Claire Nelson according to the sustainability principles of the world. What is important, I think, is that we recognize the role of engineering and engineers in the built environment, and therefore that impact on the natural world. And say by built environment, I'm talking about everything from the chemicals that we've used to prepare our food, to grow our food, to this structure of food, to the cars we drive, to the buildings we live in. Everything that we have touched since this morning, since we have arisen this morning, everything we slept on has been built by an engineer. Isn't it wonderful to know that our community has so much power, never mind what those economists and financiers say? And so this is why I think as we're looking towards the 2030 goals, it's very important that the voice of engineers be loud and very much in the forefront, and not just be left to the environmental engineers, but all engineers, I believe, must become sustainability literate.
Exactly. We will continue with Dr. John Atkinson.
Good morning.
Dr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson, and thanks to all panelists here. Thanks to GDC, IFEES for providing the venue to share and contribute. This is such an impressive panel and working group to be a part of, and I'm really just excited, frankly, to see where it goes. So, you know, just to provide a little bit more context on my background. I'm the Stevens Chair in Engineering Sustainability at the University of Buffalo. I'm an associate professor in environmental engineering. My research focus is waste management. So I'm sort of all in when it comes to research, teaching, and even service in the realm of engineering sustainability. As Dr. Nelson said, I teach an undergraduate sustainability course. It's growing in popularity, it's growing in enrollment, which is fantastic. I also teach a sustainability engineering study abroad course. It's the most popular study abroad course on our campus, and we go to Costa Rica, we study their energy systems, their social systems, and things like that. And then also, about 3 years ago, we created an engineering sustainability master's degree. And so I direct that and I advise the students, and it leads to lots of fun conversations. But again, all of this is to just say that I'm entrenched in engineering sustainability. And most importantly, I get to talk to students about it all the time. So I have a fairly good sense of what the students are looking for, which ultimately my belief is that faculty respond to student demands, not the other way around. And I think students have their finger on the pulse better than most of us. And so it's really a privilege to get to chat sustainability with them all the time. So Dr. Nelson asked me to talk about what I know so far, and that's a very humbling question, because the number one thing I know is that I have a lot to learn, especially in engineering sustainability. I think it's dynamic, it's changing, and as a result, it's a continuously evolving body of knowledge, and recognizing that is very, very important for me. Learning from the students is very, very important to me. Learning from everybody here throughout the world is very, very important to me. So with that said, I'll give it a shot, and I'll pass along some info that I've sort of picked up over the last few years, again, largely from interactions with students. So first and foremost, what I think should ultimately be one of the main reasons we're here is I know that students want more. They, as I said, I truly believe they have better foresight, they're more engaged, they know how to use their phones better than all of us. They know what's going on, and they want engineering sustainability content. They're practically begging for it. I have an endless line of students outside of my office that just want to chat sustainability. It's tricky sometimes to get the rest of my work done, because it's fun. These are wonderful conversations, and they know this is the correct path forward. So that's the first thing I know. Students want more. The second is that students see through rebrands. And what I mean by that is a lot of folks are putting the word sustainability in front of anything. All of a sudden we have green engineering, and we have, environmental and sustainability engineering, and they can see through that. To them, it is not just a word. Sustainability is not a buzzword. It absolutely must be backed by innovative and thoughtful curricula. They aren't just trying to improve their CVs. They genuinely see sustainability and sustainability engineering as a lifestyle. It's a passion. It's a commitment of theirs. It is not a choice. Frankly, it's a must-do, as the previous speaker said. And so they want to make a difference in their lives and their jobs, and they know that engineering sustainability is how they're going to do it. So that's the second thing. I know that engineering sustainability conversations can't happen in vacuums. And what I mean by that is that these conversations absolutely require diversity. And I mean that in every sense of the word. They must include folks with different backgrounds, different experiences, different beliefs, different worldviews, different countries, different genders, different ages, and everything in between. This is, in my opinion, engineering sustainability is how, at least in the US, we advance past a lot of the stereotypes that have traditionally been associated with engineering, and frankly, what a lot of the folks on this panel have done a wonderful job, including Dr. Nelson, of breaking some of those stereotypes. So I think engineering sustainability is very much a path forward. I know that sustainability provides an opportunity for students to differentiate themselves. And when I say that, I don't just mean differentiate themselves from their peers and get a leg up on the competition, so to speak. It's an opportunity, and this might sound a little abstract, but to differentiate themselves from robots and from computers that will absolutely always be able to solve math problems faster than them and more accurately than them. So I think with a sustainability engineering curriculum, we have an opportunity to teach things like ethics, humility, empathy, kindness, creativity, systems thinking, communication. These are words that have all too often been left out of traditional engineering curricula in favor of things like, a sixth fluid mechanics class or differential equation 7. Imagine a community of engineers that have been trained in ethics and that are taught that empathy is the priority. This is how the world changes. This is how the engineering field advances. And last but not least, I know that no department owns sustainability. And this is really a tricky one. The subject is inherently broad. In fact, no school owns sustainability either. We have to collaborate with scientists. We have to collaborate with artists. We have to collaborate with folks that don't have formal education or training. They have just as much to add to this topic as any of us that, you know, went to school for 100 years. And so this is an opportunity to work together to develop curricula that provide breadth. Just as an example, our engineering master's degree requires courses in ethics, in energy, and in economics. And I think that's just a start. I would describe that as sort of the bare minimum. We're tasked with developing curricula that provide the inherent depth that's linked to sustainability, but also, I'm sorry, the inherent breadth that's linked to sustainability, but also depth. So it's really a challenge, and it requires us to work together. So with that, I'll wrap. Thank you for the opportunity to say a little bit of what I've learned in the last few years thinking about this basically all the time, and I really look forward to ongoing discussions with this panel and the community beyond. So thank you, Dr. Nelson. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, GDC, IFEES, and more.
And finally, let's hear from Dr. Niebert-Blair.
Dr. Atkinson. And now we move to the people in the field. Dr. Niebert-Blair is in Guyana, and she's very involved in supporting you know, different scientific and energy transitions in the region. And she's a mechanical engineer, but also studied something called transition engineer. And I thought that was really great. Having heard about it in theory, I met the first person who actually did a degree in that. I thought she could give us some answers around the question of, okay, so you're in the field, what does the market need? What is it that governments in small island developing states need? What is it that companies in the small island developing states need if we're to design communities that are sustainable, design products and services that are sustainable? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson, and thanks to the host and the fellow panelists for being here, and happy to share on my views of how to move our development on a whole going forward. Just a little bit more on some of the work that I've done. As Dr. Atkinson would have mentioned, you know, sustainability seems to be the buzzword, especially in the corporate world, where we try to attract funding that is in that line available to the public and private sector. And as part of my job, being with the GIZ and working with energy, those are some of the key things that we tend to look for in a program. Now, having come from academia and having studied the whole realm of what really exists in terms of how engineering is done, more or less to understand what we do, in my work, there are a number of engineering facets or methods or systems that, you know, we would come across when we look at engineering design on a whole. So in terms of engineering, I would say, first of all, it's trying to find a solution to a problem that exists within the society. And so we have identified numerous ways of doing that. Like we said, sustainability is inherent in what we do. However, we have looked at concurrent engineering. We have even had such things as collaborative engineering, collaborative innovation, transition engineering, which I'll talk specifically about. We've looked at something called universal design that looks at 7 principles of universal design. Product design, where we try to design a product based on what the customer wants using quality functions and the house of quality for those who are familiar with manufacturing management. Design for X, where we tend to want to know what the customer wants and we design for that. Inclusive design, humanitarian engineering, and in terms of non-engineering designs, we looked at things like sustainable development, sustainable community development, design for a community, you will hear a lot about that, change laboratory, fabrication labs or fab labs, and of course, lately we have what we call smart villages. So there are a host of different schools of thought and methods or approaches that tend to want to incorporate sustainability into the realm of designing. Now, as it comes to transition engineering, where I was more or less focused more on, given the other forms of engineering after studying manufacturing engineering at Cambridge. Transition engineering tends to allow for the merging of experts. All right, it is similar to what we consider with the story of the 7 wise men and the elephant. I don't know how familiar we are on that story of the 7 wise men and the elephant, when the king, you know, he wanted to find a solution and he called the 7 wise men there and he asked them for a solution on the different things. And we can look at that relatively to what we do. We can say, okay, there's a nation of people and you have problems with water, food, energy, school, health. We have all these problems that we're trying to find. And of such, we have seen where our scholars have tried to find a single matrix to define what this should be. Whether or not it works or whether or not it fits, it's a whole different story. So a lot about what transition engineering is about is trying to find a fit, or more or less to redesign and redevelopment of existing systems to allow for a downshift, whereby we have an ultra low material, energy, and natural resource consumption. So how do we do that? How will that ever be possible with a growing population? So we have already identified what is a wicked problem. And so the first thing is for us as students beginning to learn transition engineering or beginning to answer the sustainability challenge is to identify what is the real problem. It's a wicked problem. It's a problem we created and we will continue to create as we find solutions. So the answer always comes with understanding how to define the problem. And I come back to the story of the 7 wise men and the elephant. And in terms of defining the problem should not only be defined from one perspective. So as an engineer, we have to be able to really and truly have an in-depth understanding of engineering sciences as much as we can and we can do, and also be able to collaborate with our colleagues, right, in a way that will add value to what we're going to provide. Because we generally come up with solutions. We have the tools. I've listed some of the approaches we've used, and there are tools associated with each approach. Even in transition engineering, we have a 7-step approach in transition engineering. And what that does is that it looks at the past. The first step is looking at the history of the past 100 years to see what was done. So now we have allowed for our engineering students to appreciate history, appreciate how things have changed through time, see what was done and understand why it was done, see what was done in terms of the social aspect, listen from the sociologists, anthropologists, scientists, in terms of human, social and environmental well-being, listen to what persons have to say in that regard and try to filter it out, because to be fair, the answers aren't there yet. So when we say we want to teach something to our students, it's not as though, okay, students, I have the solutions and this is what will happen. No, we are trying to create a new kind of pedagogical thinking that people will now be able to internalize a problem, reach out to the relevant groups of scholars within what exists in our world, and together devise solutions. So I think that aspect of engineering is what I find very creative and innovative and required for the transition we need. So going back to the story, so I'm telling like 3 parallel stories here. So going back to the story of the 7 wise men, they all had their own talents, but yet they could not have identified that it was an animal just because the king had blindfolded them. So our blindfolds in the real world will be our discipline. We're trained to focus on our discipline. I'm a mechanical engineer, I just do mechanical aspects. I know that the motor needs some kind of magnetism and electrical excitation, but yet I tend to focus on the mechanical aspect. So what we have to do, or what an engineering syllabus will need to inspire in our future generation is for them to now remove that blindfold. Yes, I know to do this, I know to apply the science, but let me think outside the box to find a solution with my colleagues helping me. Similarly, with the 7 wise men, to end that story, they were not told not to remove the blindfold, but they kept the blindfold on and they couldn't see it was an elephant. So I'm just wanting to say that in a university, in a college where we have all the different faculties, like Dr. Atkinson rightly said, no one owns the sustainability mantra. It is something that must be shared amongst us across the board. And together we create more or less what we call clinics or labs or whatever you want to call it, whatever innovative word, where people learn how to work together with communities to find solutions. And I think that's a core aspect in any sustainability teaching at our academic institutions that we should seek to develop and implement. More or less working now in the sector, I see that we need it more than anything else, because there are lots of things that happens when it comes to policy development. And so engineers must also be welcomed into that discussion on policy so that we are sure when we create a policy, it makes sense. We want to go to 50% renewable energy by 2050. What it is that is required. We do the same transition engineering step, it will take a transition. So we look at the past, what was done, what was required, what we have, what will happen if we continue doing that. And in the next 100 years, what do we want? So we draw a picture, we develop what we want, and then we go back and we say, okay, what projects must be done to realize what we want? And so now the main aspect is for students to think about what projects they will develop so that they can have that with their colleagues. And so that is where the transition is, so that when we get to 2100, given our current state, we will be able to be using less and be able to live a comfortable and happy lifestyle. So in my view, that is what it will take. It will take more than just educating persons about the different disciplines. It also takes a collaborative approach into us working together to find a solution, especially when it comes to the real world. The real world is very harsh for students when they get out with their knowledge.
So I don't know how you feel, but I'm super excited about building that future. Yeah, that was already the talk, and I would like to thank you for joining today and for giving your attention to the ideas and thoughts that were put forward. And now I'm just really curious if there are any ideas or thoughts that you have that you would like to share. If so, please go ahead, and thank you.
Yes, I have a question about that. Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, David. Yes. One important question is about the engineering design. It's talk about the system, and it's also talk about that how to use the things sustainable, and what kind of problem it can handle. I have a question about the technology. How you make sure that technology it can be sustainable, because some technology come to the society somehow will also trigger to the problem, like maybe some working place will be take, and some like that opportunities will also be taken, and then it renew a lot of things and make everything so simplified. And how you make sure that it's sustainable is also triggers new problems in the society, as you say.
That is an excellent question. That's a big question. So thank you for that one. Maybe let's start with sustainable. I wanted to show to you today that sustainability and technology is not just about materials and the supply chain, right? Which has sort of been the focus of the past decades, is that we need to reduce CO2 output, we need to reduce consumption of materials and so on. That is a major part of our global responsible use of the materials that we have. The other part of that is exactly the question about the impact of technology on society and the mental and physical health of human beings. And this has, for this second part, it's very difficult to address that in companies, to even give it publicly a forum. Like materials and supply chains are very prominent in media, for example. It is the big discourse we've been having that is currently popping up again. But the other side of the coin of dark design patterns, of certain social media tools creating depression in people, or creating problems in democracy, for example, this is something that is almost censored in media, you could say. So, but back to your question of how to practically apply that in the corporate context, if I understand you correctly, right?
Yes, yes.
And you brought up a very good word. You used the word simplify, and that has sort of been our tradition in the past hundreds of years. The principles of abstraction, of rationalization, of making things measurable that we can see is like the essence of science as we know it in the West, for example. And it has been a very successful strategy for everyone who has come up with it, applied it, the institutions that have trained it, and so on. And now there is sort of a paradigm shift happening where we are starting to realize, or some of us, that a simplified view of reality is not enough anymore. It's like we reached a sort of a tipping point where complexity all of a sudden wants to be understood. And the challenge is that currently we don't have yet all the tools in place that can help us with that. And the way people are being trained in universities or in applied schools, which is just as important, or even just in work, you know, is that we have a gap. And groups as the one we've just seen try to develop this new curriculum for how to invent, apply tools that that represent a complex reality, because this is the shift that is currently happening in society and in science. Still very small, but we're getting there. So I cannot give you an answer yet, but I would like to encourage you.
It's good. It's good
Yeah.
answer. I already got a lot of from your
Okay.
idea. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's a great question. It's exactly the kind of question we got to ask, because there is complexity studies, but just very theoretical also, which is okay. You need to first go through these things scientifically, but now is really the time. Which tools can we take from that to apply in the real world that helps us build better technology? Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Because I really like the engineering things, and I think that can enhance the societies develop fast, and also can make the societies the progress is be simplified. It can. In the histories from the 100 years to now, it really gave us a lot of things already, and like we know that a lot of technology improved, but actually is also handle and also enhance the working opportunities problems. It will somehow decrease the working place, but also create the new places in future. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. More questions? Or
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Emilia.
Thank you so much. It's always so, I don't know, insightful. I get so inspired when I hear you speak. I have a comment/question. I don't know if you can answer this or if anybody can, but I just want to kind of bring it forth. It's so refreshing to hear these kind of presentations without mentioning the word capitalism. You know, that it doesn't become like a mantra of capitalism is bad. This is bringing us to the apocalypse. I would be interested in your thoughts on that. Can sustainable engineering exist at all under the framework of capitalism? Is it a societal issue, like our societal model, which is wrong, or how can we kind of shift that? And is it relevant at all, in your opinion?
Another amazing question. Thank you, Emilia. That's so great. It inspires big questions. That's why next time I should bring an economist on board. He can help you much better with that. And I've actually met someone the other day. So I will bring him in with such questions. But that is a question that I have as well. And that comes from the fact that since our thinking is conditioned by our personal lives, our socialization, the institutions and peoples that we have had contact with, it is very hard for a lot of people to imagine anything else other than what they currently know. And I feel the same. Like I grew up in a system, right, that is where you sell your time to a company and you get your salary, and then you have a life however you want to do that, right, to your satisfaction. And especially with my experience in the industry, the capital aspect is so tightly linked to the technology. It is as if they're the same. And I can absolutely say that, yes, it is possible. We just have to find a way to make that happen. But how exactly that looks like, I still have, it's hard for me to imagine. And that's why I would like to see exactly such a type of engineering problem, right? This is something, exactly a type of problem that we would have to build together. We need we need economists for that. We need industrialists for that. We need other people for that who could help develop these potential futures. And then even with that, you could have the opportunity to see, is one more preferable than the other, right? Try to weigh them, try to assess them if what you want to build then has a good impact or negative impact or so on. Yeah, excellent question, Emilia.
Yes, thank you for the answer. I'm sorry for this big question.
Not
this
at
is
all.
Something that that I think about a lot too, like because there's a lot of criticism on capitalism without really bringing any alternatives. And it's an interesting question, that can we keep this focus on generating profits and wealth and just shifting the perception of value, shifting what the consumers want through some kind of transparency and other measures like you mentioned, regulations maybe. So yeah, I'm curious to continue the discussion.
Thank you, Emilia. Would someone from the group like to add to that? See how you're raising your hand?
Yeah, because I really like that question she just gave about the capitalism, because I also studied something about that. Yeah, in how to say, in the macroeconomics, this kind of perspective, we can know that the state policies will give the limitations of the direction, what should we develop in the future. So somehow whole engineering is developed. Actually, we have a macro directions, which is from the governments and from the wars. For example, we know that the sustainable, like green economies already appear on the world, and is actually running by the UN and also by the different countries on the world. We know a really famous company is Patagonia. They're developing method actually is used this kind of sustainable ways, and in the early phase of their development, they actually really lost a lot of cost because they really focus on that kind of sustainable values. But after the government and the whole world's peoples noticed that we have the problems of the environment, and then everyone began to support their values and gave the benefits to them to support them to develop in this kind of method. I think it's really interesting question. I think it's also the other ways what we develop our engineering. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
If I can just, add a few comments about capitalism. It might be helpful for everybody to do some research on Francois Quesnay. That's Q-U-E-S-N-A-Y. Quesnay was essentially the economics advisor to the then French king. And he became very inspired by Taoism, and specifically Wu Wei, which is this principle within Taoism of almost, letting nature get on with it, let it be, that then became, in French terms, laissez-faire economics. So Quesnay's philosophical work was inspired by Taoism, and he created something called the physiocracy movement. The physiocracy movement then inspired Adam Smith's capitalism, as well as Karl Marx's communism ideas. And the common technology between both of them is the algebra and calculus. So it might be worth, looking into that lineage and that history and figuring out for yourselves, where within that model can we, change some of the variables or change some of the functions. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of values, what we're actually experiencing, and it's really funny because people have been commenting about, the Ukraine-Russia war being a sort of replay of the 1970s and the oil crisis, and then the Iranian crisis. And in the 70s, what happened was not just, companies like Patagonia or Ben & Jerry's or, the Body Shop, they started to emerge. There was also James Lovelock. He published a book called The Gaia Theory. So in the late 70s and early 80s, what we saw was, this mushrooming of these amazing companies that were very, sustainability focused, like Patagonia or like the Body Shop. And so now is actually a really fertile time for, this generation of, innovators, problem solvers, people who really care about, sustainable capitalism, to actually build those new business models, as well as, the technologies. And I would say that, something like, for example, Huawei's augmented reality kits or Huawei's machine learning kits. Huawei has, used a lot of the machine learning tools, the stack, the HMS core, to actually tune and reduce, network inefficiencies, and to make, the network much more sustainable. So that might be, those are three things that, it might be worth looking into as part of our collective, knowledge sharing.
Thank you very much, Twain. That you gave me too much homework now. I have to find the time to look into that. Thank you. And
we always have homework. This is the beauty of learning. It's like, and I love that story about, the 7 wise men and the elephants, because all of these wisdoms are wisdoms of, hundreds of years. And as humans, the joy of it is that we're continuously learning with each other, right? And, gaining perspectives. So yeah, we're all doing homework. We're doing homework until, literally our final days, which is the wonderful thing.
Yes, I agree. And I would just like to share one final thing that came to my mind when you spoke, Twain, which is there is a person, his name is Graham Boyd. I will share the link in the chat. And he actually wrote a book called Rebuild, the Economy, Leadership and You, a toolkit for builders of a better world. You can take a look into that, Emilia. They are trying to build something else, yeah, maybe that's also an interesting resource. We're already so far ahead of time. I don't want to keep you longer. Any other feedback, questions you would like to share? That's good. Then I would like again to thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be in this group, and I look forward to the next sessions and to learning from you.
Brava, Eva. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. If Jan could again share the 3 links to Huawei resources in chat, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I can share.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So we literally are in new territories. As you know, as Eva rightly says, there are toolkits which are missing in terms of, you know, now trying to humanize engineering tools that might have been, you know, oriented for the industrial age, essentially. So for the machine age of, you know, industrialization between, you know, 1750 to 1950 or so. And here we are in 2022. So, you know, it literally is an open book, a sandpit for us to, you know, play in, to explore, to have open discussions about, you know, how we feel about the technologies, the artificial intelligence, how we feel about whether or not the artificial intelligence should be making decisions, or whether we should have human agency over the AI. How we can teach the artificial intelligence about our human values. You know, how do we value ourselves? How do we value each other? How do we value, you know, my little my little plant pot? How do we value Emilia's, you know, wonderful sharing with our friends in terms of, you know, propagating life? I think ultimately, you know, that's the most important thing is, you know, us as humans together figuring out how we can sustain each other's lives with the technologies. So in terms of, you know, Huawei, there are technologies, there are booklets, there's a wealth of, you know, there's a knowledge base. And we would encourage, and I thought Eva's point about active participation in the quote from Renee was fantastic, because Mario Bunge was fantastic, because it's about active participation. We are in times where we cannot be silent, because otherwise, you know, the technology may remove our freedoms of speech. We cannot be inactive, because the technology may tell us, you know, whether or not we can do something, walk or not walk. So we actually have to build those technologies together. We have to do, you know, active participation. So please do check, you know, Huawei's resources. Please do continue, you know, the conversations with each other. Never be silent. No matter, you know, no matter what your question is, always ask the question, right? Because none of us have all of the answers. but some of us might have, you know, the perspective or an insight, a cultural insight. And the more that we actually share these cultural insights and, you know, propose and ask and propose solutions, the sooner we will actually, you know, get to this technological future that we built. So with that, I just want to, again, you know, thank Eva so much for giving us so much food for thought and, you know, such a sort of comprehensive overview of systems engineering and things to consider about how we go about humanizing technologies.